So now we have our character, we have a skeleton which is going to drive the deformation of the model. As we can see, we can now pose her arms. We have these extra joints in here which will give us that nice extra rotation around the bicep rather than the shoulder, so we don't get a nasty shoulder twist like that. Everything is bound, weighted, ready to go, so we can just go straight in and start posing her and render her out and get her ready to be the actress. But the problem is, at this stage, all we have, I just press Control and Space just to make that a bit bigger, we have the skeleton, but if we move this around, we ideally want the feet to remain on the floor. If you imagine we're trying to animate this, we're going to have to move her waist down, then we're going to have to compensate by raising her legs, trying to get the feet in there and trying to keep them in the same position without them wobbling or looking odd or floating around. What we can do is use some of May's other tools to apply a rig on top of this skeleton, and that will effectively control the skeleton, an extra layer of control sort of on top, set aside from the skeleton, sort of like a marionette with the strings which control the arms and the legs. And the idea behind the rig is that it makes it much easier to control and pose this character, and we can add in elements like IK, FK, which will help to plant the feet and the hands. So let's just go straight in and start looking at planting the feet, as that's like a main area to work on. So first of all, we need to create some IK. And IK is just inverse kinematics. You have IK and FK. FK is forward kinematics, IK is inverse kinematics. Forward K, or FK, is basically the joints being evaluated forwards. So we would rotate this one, then we would rotate this one. So this is FK. What IK does is it evaluates the joints in reverse. So it would work from the heel down here, up to the knee, up to the hip. So it sort of reverses the way the joints work. And you'll see it in action in a second. So let's first go in and create some IK. Let's switch to our animation marking menu. Skeleton IK handle tool. Let's open up the options. Let's just bring this in. Let's just reset it. So we have these main options, an SC solver and an RP solver. So the RP solver is a rotation pivot solver, and that's going to give us an extra layer of control, and we're going to use that on the knee because the rotation pivot will allow us to pose the direction of the knee. So all we're going to do is select our starting joint, which is the hip, select the ankle, and there we have our IK. Now we have the handle in place, and as you see, if we raise and lower that, it's evaluating in reverse. So it's starting at the heel, then rotating the knee, and then rotating the hip. If I drop the waist down, you see nothing really happens. But what we can do, if I open up the attributes for the IK handle, where is it? If we turn on stickiness, that should lock that in place, but we're still getting that weird rotation on the foot. So we ideally want the foot to be flat, yet we want this to move down. So we can add in a couple more IK handles. Now we don't want these to have rotation planes on them, so we'll use the SC solver instead. So to change that to IK SC solver, select the heel and then the ball of the foot, and the actual tip of the toe is hidden in this, so let's just make that visible again. And then one from the ball of the foot down to the toe. Now again, we could go in, make these sticky, just so they stay in place. Then if we raise and lower the hips, see, the foot is now locked to the floor. But having to go in and animate these individually isn't very intuitive. Plus we have these main joints here, and ideally we don't want to be touching the main skeleton. So we can add some more controls over the top of this to sort of group all of these IK handles and put them into a nice controllable foot. And what we're going to do is use a reverse foot. And it's called a reverse foot because it basically takes the foot joints, reverses the direction of the hierarchy, and then this allows you to pose the foot much easier way. So let's just, I noticed when I created the IK, the foot joints moved very slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset the position of those joints. And a quick way to do that is to go modify evaluate nodes, ignore all. So that will now be telling Maya just to ignore what the IK is doing. And we'll just select the skin, go to bind pose. And that's just switched that back. So to create the reverse foot, all we're going to do, select the foot joints, duplicate that, and we're just going to move that down. Move that out a little bit, and then we're just going to unparent that. Now you notice the knees twisted a little bit there, but we can just go to bind pose just to fix that. So this is going to control our foot. So what we need to do next is just duplicate the toe, pull that back, and that is going to give us our heel joint. And at the moment the toe is parented, the heel is parented to the ball of the foot rather than the toe. So we're just going to quickly select those and reorder those. Although that's gone a bit weird, so let's do that in the outliner. You can see we have our IK handles here. And while we're here, we can also delete these effectors which have been included in here. So we want this to be the heel. So let's rename these while we're here. We'll name it con heel because that's the control heel. Left control toe tip, left control ball, left control ankle. And now we need to just quickly reorder these. So the heel is parented to the toe, so that's better. But this still isn't in reverse. We need to reverse the order. Now we could go in and just rearrange these, but a quicker way is just to select the heel, go to skeleton, reroute skeleton. As you can see, that has just switched around the hierarchy. So now the heel is the main parent, then it goes to the toe, then it goes to the ball, then it goes to the ankle. What this allows us to do, we can move the heel around and it moves the rest of the foot. We can also select the ball, rotate that independently, which will in turn make the feet look like they're rolling on the ball of the foot. We can take that a step further, select the toe, and then we can create sort of a tiptoe effect. So let's just move this back up to where that heel was. So let's just quickly reroute that again, just so that the ankle is now in control. I'm just going to hold down V and snap that back to the ankle here, just so they're in the exact same place. Let's just reroute that skeleton again, just fixing it back. And just so that we can concentrate just on those joints there and we don't get muddled with the leg or the main bound skeleton, I'm just going to quickly hide that foot. So what we need to do now, in fact, let's just get rid of the polygons as well. So what we need to do now, let's just hold V and snap these IK handles to these joints here. And then we're just going to parent them. So the IK handle here for the ankle needs to be parented to the ankle. The IK handle for the ball needs to be parented to the ball, and for the toe to the toe. So now when we move this, you see if we evaluate nodes back on, evaluate all, the IK handles are moving with it. Let's bring back our polygons. Now if we raise the foot, like so. Well, it's also a good idea at this point, if we notice, we have these values on the heel joint. We can't freeze those attributes to zero those out. So what you would normally do is create a controller, maybe a locator or a nice NURBS shape for you to select, something a bit more intuitive rather than having to select the joints directly. But just quickly for now, I'm just going to group that, press insert, hold down V and snap that back to that joint there, just so that the pivot point is back where the heel is. And now this group is all nicely zeroed out. So let's call this left control foot. And obviously you can repeat this process for the opposite side. So now we can pose the foot like so. We can also rotate it. We can also then go in, have her balancing on the ball of the foot just by rotating that joint there, and also on her tiptoes. So that's just a quick way of rigging the leg, just so it's a much easier way to quickly pose the leg and the foot. And we can also now, just as we did before when these were all set to sticky, we can raise and lower the hips and the feet will stay where they are. So one more thing we need to do, if I just bring back that main skeleton, we want to have control over the knee and where the knee is going to point. And this is why we created the ankle IK handle as an RP solver, so that we could rotate the knee and control the rotation. Again, a nice controller would be good here, but let's just create a locator for now. Let's just hold down V and snap that to the knee point. Let's just scale that down a little bit, just so it's a bit easier to work with. Move that out in front of the knee, because this is what the knee is going to be pointed at. So with that still selected, let's select the IK handle for the ankle, and we're going to go to Constrain Pole Vector. Well, you notice the knee did twist a little bit there, but now when we rotate this, the knee is going to point wherever that locator is. So again, we could quickly just go in, pose the foot like so, but maybe we want her knee to point out slightly rather than in. We can just do that. So there we've added controls to the foot and to the knee. You can take this much further, and it's always a good idea to just go in. Now we know the IK handles are all done and controlled by the foot, we can just go in and hide those so you're not accidentally selecting them as you're animating. And you can go in and add a lot more control to this. Like if you're selecting the left foot control to control the foot, why not add a few attributes onto here which directly connect to the actual joints here? So rather than selecting the joints, having to go in and physically select each of these areas here to rotate them, you just have an attribute on here which is connected directly to those joints, so it's all nicely tidied up and in one place. And we're going to look at connecting attributes now as we move up and we add a bit more control to the arm. So we've done one leg, and like I say, you can mirror that across for the other leg. Tidy it up a little bit, hide the attributes and objects that you don't really need or want people to be playing around with. So we can do something similar with the arm. We can use the existing joints, duplicate these and turn them into a rig which works on top of the arm. So an animator, for example, won't come in. These rotations are fine, but they'll probably just rotate from the shoulder and not even realise that there's this extra control in here. So we want to simplify this arm so that the animator only just needs to worry about the shoulder. They don't have to go in and edit these extra joints again, because that's just going to take longer to do. So let's just create a duplicate of the arm. move that up so we can see what we're doing, and we're going to go unparent because we don't want that parented and sitting underneath the main joint hierarchy. Now we're going to simplify this. Just going to delete these. And just as a little tip, if you want to change the colour of the joints, we can just go to display, wireframe colour, and we can give it a different colour like so. Close, just so we can differentiate it from the main arm. So we no longer want these joints in here. So we can go to skeleton, remove joint, and that's just going to strip out those joints we added in. So now we just want this arm here to control this arm here, and to do that we're going to use the node editor. I'm just going to move this out. Actually, before I do, let's just do some renaming just so we know what's what. Left control shoulder, left control elbow, left control wrist, just so we can differentiate that from the main skeleton. Let's move this over here. Now to connect this to this, we're just going to use the node editor. So go to Window, Node Editor. We'll just bring this down. And this editor's only been in Maya for the past few revisions. It's quite a nice little tool for quickly editing nodes, obviously. So let's select our shoulder joint on our control shoulder and our shoulder joint on the bound skeleton. And then we're just going to click this input and output connections, and that's going to bring those in. Let's just make this a little bit bigger if we can. So we want the left shoulder there, which you may not be able to see. Left shoulder twist. We want our left control shoulder. And we've got our left control elbow down here. I'll just zoom in a little bit. Actually, I could probably make that a little bit bigger for now. Now, these are each node. What we want to do is just open these up so that we can see the attributes. So if you see, we have these little blue boxes just up here. They open these up at different stages. So we know we want to connect the left shoulder's rotation attribute, so let's just open those up. So actually let's just move these so we don't get confused. We're connecting the left control, the left control shoulder to the left shoulder. The left control elbow will go on to the left elbow, which isn't in this yet, but I'm just going to concentrate on the left control shoulder. So let's click that twice to open up those rotation attributes here. We have our left normal shoulder here and our left shoulder twist. Again, let's open up those rotations. So we want our left control shoulder to edit, to be directly connected to the bound shoulder. So in here, all we need to do is, we don't want the X because we want the rotation X on here to rotate the X attribute on here. So let's connect the Y, and all we do is click and drag, and you can see here, move it over to the Y, and that's done. So the same with the Z. Now for the X, we want to skip the left shoulder and we want to pipe that in to the left shoulder twist. So they're all connected up. If I just minimize this. Now if we look at the shoulder, remember this is what we're going to be controlling the rig with. We do not want to touch this skeleton. Rotate Y, that's working fine. Rotate Z, that's working fine. Rotate X. And if you notice, that is twisting from here. Now the animator will never see this skeleton. This will be hidden, locked away. All they'll see are these three joints. But what's working underneath are these connections which are editing the twist down here. And we can continue this on. Let's just bring that up. So now we can move down to the elbow, graph those connections. So we want our control elbow to control our main elbow. So let's just move some of these around. Zoom in. And obviously if you want full rotation control, you don't need to open these up. We could just select the rotate and pipe it directly into the rotate there. So we could do that here, although your elbow does only rotate around one axis. So it just depends what sort of rig you want. So that's the elbow done. So now we want to do the same with the wrist. So select both wrists, let's graph those up. So we have our left control wrist, deselect that. We have our main wrist twist joint, and we have our main wrist. So just like we did with the shoulder, let's just open these up, open the rotations. Click that twice, open the rotations. Let's just move that up. So we know that we want the Y and the Z to directly control the main wrist. So let's just pipe those across. So the control wrist Y into the main wrist Y, control wrist Z into the main wrist Z. But again, we want this wrist here to twist this wrist twist joint here. And we know that's around the x-axis, so we drag that across to the wrist twist. Let's just minimize that. So now we can tell what this joint is affecting because it turns purple. So we have that connected there, this connected here, and X rotates the wrist twist there rather than the hand here. So that is the arm just basically rigged. You can obviously add IK on top of that. Just create an IK handle going from the shoulder to the wrist. Create a locator. If you use a rotation pivot solver, you will be able to pose the elbow just like we did with the knee. But one final step, we just need to make sure that this arm, if we move the waist around, it's not going to work very well if this arm is just floating around here. So all we're going to do is we're going to select the main skeleton shoulder, select this arm, and we're going to use another constraint, and we're just going to use a point constraint. If we open up the options, we just reset these. We want to constrain everything because we want this to just be locked to that shoulder. We don't want to maintain the offset because we actually want this to physically move to the shoulder. Click add, and that has moved that arm down to there. So let's just select the main skeleton and hide that so that we're just left with our main controls. So actually let's just demonstrate this moving first. As you can see, we're moving her waist up and down and around. The leg is working nicely and the control arm is following where the rig is going. So if we hide this, now we can go in and we can rotate the arm. The animator only has these three joints to play with. As we can see, that's twisting nicely around there. Rotate the elbow, go down to the wrist, twist the wrist, and that's working well there as well. And again, you can copy this across to the other side. You can add IK in. And then you can use the, if we go to animation, animate, IKFK keys, and this will allow you to switch between using inverse kinematics and forward kinematics. But that can be shown in a different tutorial. All we're focusing on now is just adding a basic rig into this character just so that we can pose her a little easier. So there you've got your legs posable, you've got your arm posable. You can go in and just continue on like this, adding in extra controls. I'd suggest maybe adding in a control for the waist, maybe if we just create a NURBS primitive circle, let's just create that, snap that to the position of that joint, and then we select the hip. What we can do is we can do a parent constraint, and this will effectively parent this to the hip, We don't want to maintain the offset. Click apply. So now, if that main skeleton is hidden, we can still have the access to these controllers, and we can move her, we can rotate her, and obviously if you've done both sides of the skeleton, then both those legs will be locked to the floor. So enough rambling. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly just pause the video and load in another rig that I've worked a lot more on, just to demonstrate what sort of effects you can get from it. Okay, before I load in that other skeleton, I just wanted to point something out which you may have noticed as you've been building your rig. If you rotate the waist, as we can see here, the control arm is floating away from the main arm. So how do we fix that? Well, rather than using connections, which the problem is, if the attributes on here are 0, on the control shoulder are 0, then it's not going to effectively rotate the main shoulder. So we're going to use, instead, rather than using connections on the shoulder, you can use another constraint. So let's first go in, get our control shoulder, and let's just break that point constraint. Delete selected, no, break connections, there we go. And let's just move this up. Let's select our shoulder and let's just break those connections as well. So now the X is still connected to there, but the actual Y and Z are no longer controlling that shoulder. So what we're going to do is select the control shoulder, select the main shoulder and go to Constrain Orient. And you'll see in here we have constrain axes. Now we don't want to constrain all because we still want the rotate X to control the bicep twist here. So we're only going to constrain the Y and the Z. Click add. Now we can rotate the shoulder just as we did before, with the X still working on that bicep twist there. So let's just point constraint this again, constrain point, just so that they're lying in the same position. Now if we rotate there, we can see the control shoulder is locked in place with the base skeleton, but the arms are now overlapping each other correctly, so they're not floating away from each other. So in this instance, I'd suggest for the shoulder, I'd do that sort of setup where you're using a orient constraint rather than direct connections between them. As you can imagine, if you're animating and the control arm is floating away up here, you're not going to get a proper response to where you're rotating those sorts of joints. Anyway, with that little fix in there, I'm just going to quickly load in a rig which I've already done a lot more work on, just so I can show some of the key areas and some of the things that you can do if you spend a bit more time adding more controls. So this is a more cleaned up version of the rig. It's had a lot more time spent on it. We've created these icons which represent what you're selecting. They're different colours on each side, so you know which is the left and right hand side. And as we can see, it's pretty much just like we had set up before. As I mentioned, add attributes onto the controller, so you're not actually going in and editing those joints. Ideally, you don't want to touch the joints. Adding these attributes is just directly connected to those joints in there. So now we can create that sort of pose just by selecting the foot. We have an extra toe rotating there as well, and our tip toe, which we saw before. Our knee position, again, all just done by NURBS curves. We have our control arm, just like we saw before, just with the display handles visible, which just makes it easier to control. We've got that wrist twist in there. This icon here is connected to the IK which is in the arm. Now I'm just going to quickly show you how to work this. At the moment it doesn't do anything. Now briefly I showed you this IK-FK keys. All you would do to enable this is create a controller like this, select the IK, connect, and then click connect to IK-FK, and that will allow you to disable and enable the IK on the arm, so you can switch between IK and FK. So if we wanted to, we could enable IK solver, and now when we move this, the hand is under the control of the IK. Even if we move the waist, the hand is locked. So if we undo that, click that again, it's now disabled, and you can animate that as you're working. You can also move your IK to FK. So if you've moved your arm into a FK position, you can you can move the position of the FK arm to the IK arm and vice versa. And you can also set keys which switch between the IK and FK. I get a lot of people asking me about this, how to control the IK on this sort of rig. Some of you have visited my site will probably know and have seen this rig before. It's actually part of a free script which I have, which is an auto rigging tool called Creature Tools, and it gives you this sort of rig in a matter of a few clicks. You just position the joints, specify the type of rig, and you get this sort of setup. Just as a bit of a disclaimer, if you do visit my site and download this script, there are some errors with it. It's not perfect, but as you can see here, and as you can have a play around with, because these files will be supplied, you can quickly get a rig, bind the skeleton, and it gives you a good starting place to pose your character. There's some extra controls for just giving her a bit of a hip wiggle. We've got our spine controls here, and obviously finger controls. Again, extra attributes here. They're just connected up using set driven keys. They just allow you to quickly go in and pose a hand. It's all about just being able to do things quickly and without being complicated. You don't want to have to go in, select the joints, select the hierarchy, rotate the joints, set a key. If you can just quickly go in, select a control, pose it like so, it's a lot easier for the animator. The head here, we have a controller which moves the head around. And when we come to look at blend shapes later, you could add more attributes onto the head controls here and connect them directly to the blend shape controller. So you can do all the head editing just by one icon. You don't have to go in and select the blend shape editor node or anything like that. And as you can see, her eyes are locked to this controller here. And again, we've just used constraints, but instead of normal constraints, we've used aim constraint. So these eyes are always being told to aim at these locators in here. So we can give her freaky eyes like so. And then these two are just parented underneath this cube so that we can quickly position both eyes. So that's just a really quick overview of this sort of rig and what you can achieve if you spend a bit more time just adding extra layers of controls on top of your skeleton. This just, even if you're just doing an illustration, it's worth creating this base mesh, creating this sort of rig, and then later down the line, if you need to quickly create a female character like this, you can load this in, pose her, and she's done. You just need to dress her, add hair, and the scenery. You don't have to worry about having to go in, physically editing vertices, because she's already rigged. So like I said, this is available with the downloadable files, so feel free to play with it. You can, like I say, you can download Creature Tools from my website if you want to just get your hands on this automated script. If there's any problems with it, feel free to just bug me and I will try my best to fix it for you. So what next? Well, the body's posable. We can move the head around, we can move the eyes and the legs, and we can get her into numerous different poses. So what we'll do next is we will look at creating blend shapes, which will allow us to give her facial expressions and show a bit more emotion.